let me begin by telling you a little bit about a biographer's method, at least this biographer's method. It involves a lot of reading and immersion in the words that are the legacy of this great man whose life I'm writing. It's also involved a fair amount of legwork and travel. I've gone to the locales to have the experiences of Jackson's environment, for he was a person who was, in everything he did, deeply biographical. And so I've been to the ruins of the Jackson family farm in Spring Creek, Pennsylvania, where he was born in 1892. The photograph on my far right is him with his girlfriend, Irene Gerhardt, fishing in the Broken Straw Creek at that location in about 1913, 14, 15. Before their marriage in 1916. I've climbed Jackson Hill, which is behind the photographer who took that picture. The valley is named with landmarks that are the names of his forebears. And I actually climbed Jackson Hill shortly after his February 13th birthday, figuring, summer's for wimps. Let's see what it was like in the winter. And the snow was chest deep, and the slogging was very hard, and only my 12-year-old son ahead of me saying, come on, got me to the top and the breathtaking view. I've been to Jackson's boyhood home in Frewsburg, New York, to the school, or the remnants of the school he attended. Its successor is named after him in Frewsburg, to his gravesite in Frewsburg, New York, to Jamestown, to his offices, his homes, the site of his horse farm, to Chautauqua Institution, a place that was an incredibly significant part of his educational culture, even though it lacked a lot of formal schooling. I've swum in all seasons in his beloved Chautauqua Lake. Well, not winter, because it freezes. I've been to his offices in Washington, D.C. I've been, because I once worked in the Department of Justice, in this big room, which is the Attorney General's ceremonial office. I've been to the White House, at least in a tourist capacity. I've been to the Supreme Court, which is the photograph on the far left with Jackson and his law clerks during 1950-51. That's Bill Rehnquist in the crew cut in the back row on the left-hand side as you're looking at it, and his co-clerk, George Niebank. I've been to Church House at Westminster Abbey, which is where Jackson led the successful process by which 4 allied nations in the summer of 1945 negotiated a charter creating a tribunal that became the Nuremberg process, a diplomatic feat in the wreckage of war and in the fury and power of victory that had never been accomplished before. I've been to Jackson's office and hotel in Paris, nice digs, where he would sometimes repair for continental meetings from Nuremberg. I've been to the Bohemian Grove in the Redwood Groves of California, where he spent 2 glorious weeks every summer. He was a great outdoorsman, and in addition to his native New York, he fell in love with that area. A genuineness, a call me Bob quality to Jackson that was no put on. Now, my topic this evening is Albany. Albany in the life trajectory of Robert H. Jackson. I think of Albany as the skipped step in the Jackson story. He's often thought of on the big stages and in the big contexts where he came to make his mark in public life, the New Deal, Nuremberg, the Supreme Court. And he, of course, also is thought about as a classic American life in those real, gorgeous, rural wilderness settings where he had his birth, his boyhood, his Western New York childhood, his high schooling in Frewsburg and briefly in Jamestown, his complete lack of a college education, his legal apprentice work, his legal greatness in the private practice years, 2 decades that preceded his move to Washington in public life. But often the skipped step is Albany, by which I mean the Albany Law School, his year here as a student, and larger, this city as a seat of state government and a seat of legal greatness that was incredibly important to Jackson. Albany connects to Jackson because it embodies those things that Phil Neal has already briefly referred to. Logic and reason, which were his hallmarks in defining what it was about lawyering that mattered to him. Its essence in human restraint. Its practical potential to improve life. Those were the things he saw, felt called to, worked to do through the law in his life. And that's all stuff that sprang from this soil, from this school, and from this legal environment in this state. I'm delighted to focus on this skip step because Jackson and Albany, I think, is a story of great mutual benefit. For Jackson, as I'm saying, Albany was part of what was in him. Jamestown justice, which is something that Felix Frankfurter used to tweak Jackson about. They were often allies and they were dear friends, but occasionally their views would diverge, and Frankfurter, Harvard professor, great thinker, great writer, world figure, would say, you know, I'm on the right side of this and you're bogged down in Jamestown justice. Jackson took that as a compliment, but really before Jamestown justice, there was Albany justice, there was New York justice, there was the real lawyering of this state. And that's what Albany was for Jackson. Going the other way, for Albany, Jackson is yours to claim. He is truly, I'm a partisan obviously, but truly the finest in his types that this country has produced or can produce. And he did a lot more in this place than spend the night or the year. And that's what I'll talk about this evening. I'm going to talk about 4 topics. Jackson coming to the law, Jackson coming to Albany, and particularly to the Albany Law School, Jackson's returns and his almost returns to Albany, and the place of Albany understood fully in the life and the legacy of Robert Jackson. Topic 1, Robert H. Jackson comes to the law. It was simply, as he explained, always his interest. From his earliest days as a thinker, reader, talker, person, he loved ideas, he loved history, he loved argument, and the things that brought those all home as he looked at a landscape of life potentials from farming to commerce to whatever was law. Debating, oratory, and the influence of special teachers, beginning with Mary Willard, was part of what encouraged him on the law path. And Frank Mott, the influential role model who has been mentioned, under whom Jackson studied as a law apprentice for the year before and the year after, the bracket years around his Albany Law School year, was the role model that led him to the law. Frank Mott was actually somebody who Jackson's father detested. Frank Mott lived large and carried a lot of debt, didn't pay his bills. And Jackson's father, who had plenty of issues of his own, thought that was an irresponsible way to live your life. That was the mark of a bad person and a bad character. And if that's Frank Mott, and Frank Mott's a lawyer, that must be what lawyers are about. And so Jackson's father, from that face of Frank Mott on the career path, opposed his son Robert becoming a lawyer. I think it's wonderful that Justice Jackson's great-grandson, Bill Hook, is here. He's named for his grandfather, Phil Neal's friend and law school classmate, Bill Jackson. But Bill's grandfather, Bill Jackson, was named for his grandfather, William Eldred Jackson, the justice's father, the man who opposed the whole path that we celebrate tonight. So there's a wonderful irony and maybe a good second thought in how all of that has played out. Jackson's mother had a softer perspective on the law path. She kind of live and let live, wanted her boy Robert to take the path he preferred, and kind of liked Frank Mott. He was up her side of the family tree after all, and as she said, he is very nice to his mother. Over paternal opposition, following his natural calling, Robert H. Jackson comes to the law.